public meeting, live broadcasting via YouTube, and a recording will be available afterwards for everyone who wants to go and watch the events again. I'll certainly will. And just to remind everyone, the speakers are incredibly sensitive and will pick up any background noise, so do try to keep this to a minimum. There is no planned fire drill this morning, so if it does go off, please follow officers out of the building and to gather in the cathedral grounds across the road. We've tried as ever to seat board members where we can in the front bit, but obviously for anyone who is seated at the back, if you want to speak, contribute during the meeting, please do. And if you get an opportunity, there are seats there so when you want to speak, just so it can be picked up more clearly and heard in the meeting.
Thank you, Will. For the benefits of those watching online and on YouTube, and for my benefits, we'll just go around the room. So my name is John Spence, Essex County Council Cabinet Member for Children's Services, Adult Social Care, Public Health and Integration, and Chair of this board. Sarah?
Sarah McCall, Director of Wellbeing, Public Health and Communities.
Ian Tompkins, West Essex Health and Care Partnership and Essex County Council.
Tom Walker, one of the executive directors at ECC, responsibility for public health.
Paul Burstow, I chair the ICB for Hertfordshire and West Essex.
Morning everybody, Jane Gardner, Deputy Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner here in Essex.
Morning, Jean Pace, portfolio holder for partnerships in Tendring District Council and North East Essex Alliance political representative.
Good morning everybody, Nick Cosmo, Executive Director for Adult Social Care.
Good morning everybody, Councillor Lynn Scott, Cabinet Member for Essex County Council for Housing, Planning and Regeneration.
Thank you.
Good morning, Councillor Beverly Eden. I'm the Chair of the Caring Communities Commission.
And a very good chair you hold.
Will Pope, I'm Chair of Suffolk North East Essex ICB and co-chair with John of the Integrated Care Partnership.
Thank you, Bill.
Hello everybody, I am, hold on a second, I'm Sarah Troop, I'm Director at Northern District CVS. I also hold the position of Chair of Volunteer Essex and co-chair of Essex CVS's, and I'm here to bring a voluntary sector voice.
Let's see you, Sarah.
Good morning, I'm Mike Thorne, Chair of the Mid and South Essex ICB.
Morning everyone, Dan Doherty, I'm the Alliance Director for Mid Essex, part of the ICB.
Dan, could I have a natter with you at the break before the workshop, please? Of course.
Yep.
A couple of your favourite subjects.
Tom Abel, Executive at Mid and South Essex Integrated Care Board.
Thank you.
Good morning everybody, Dr Anna Davey. I am the Primary Care Board Member for the Mid and South Essex ICB.
Morning everyone, I'm Susanna Howard and I'm the Integrated Care Partnership Director for the Suffolk and North East Essex ICS.
Are you off the crutches, Susanna?
Afraid not, John.
Good morning everybody, I'm Councillor Peter Davey. I'm the Vice Chair of the Essex Association of Local Councils. I'm also Vice Chair responsible for the finances of the National Association.
I am Ali, Democratic Services.
Democratic Services.
And Will Hooper, Cabinet Advisor to John Spence.
Is there another role, Will? Or?
Yes, there are. There's
any board members that we've missed? No.
Oh.
Hi guys, Sam Glover, CEO at Healthwatch Essex.
Okay.
I'm Tony Coles, West Essex Place Director.
Thank you. That's it. So online joining us. Who's going to introduce them, please?
Morning, everyone. Helen Lincoln, Executive Director for Children and Families.
And by the sounds of it, Helen, best staying at home, so right decision. Yes?
Yeah, don't want to share my germs with you, lovely people.
Okay, Helen.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Lynette Bowers-Flint, Deputy to John under Children's Services.
Thank you, Lynette.
Good morning, Ian Davidson, Chief Executive from Tendring and Deputy Chair, and apologies I can't be in with you in person today.
Thank you, Ian. Anybody else?
I think that's it.
Right, apologies, Gemma.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Dr Jane Halpin, Councillor Kaz Risby, Councillor Vicky Davies, Councillor Mark Hooper and Georgina Blakemore.
Are there any other apologies?
Yeah, Roger Hurst, PFCC.
Yes, coping with that financial shortfall, that's horrible.
It's not good.
Also, apologies from Laura Taylor-Green from North East Essex Alliance.
I didn't think there was Stuart Angus mentioned. No, right. Oh, she's all right. I was expecting. Right, are we done? Is that-
Yes.
I have no notice of public speakers, is that right?
That's right.
Okay, so it's a minute now. Last meeting been circulated, is everybody content they are an accurate record? I like to be today because if anyone's going to pick something up, it's usually you, Peter.
No, everything's fine. Accurate record.
So you're content with the minutes accuracy?
Agreed.
Are some matters arising, Will, please? Nathan. I don't think I was giving it enough.
In terms of matters arising, there are things which are ongoing. There are things added to the forward plan. There's things being scheduled for subsequent meetings. There's the HDRC research programme, and then looking for further discussion with VCS infrastructure organisations and Health Watch Essex.
Has that happened?
I don't. Sam's got a hand up.
Sam, hello.
Hello. Yeah, we're in full conversations and everything is moving forward.
Excellent, thank you, Sam. Okay. All right, if there's nothing else to say on the minutes on the matters arising, I think that takes us to the first substantive item, which Tom enables you, I believe, in the first starring role, talking about the NHS 10-year plan, Tom.
I can tell you what I know, John, but obviously this is sort of dynamic and ongoing at the moment, but the paper that we've developed and shared with you effectively sets out the current position in regard to the 10-year plan that the Secretary of State announced, which is currently going through an engagement process. Within the plan, it kind of sets out three shifts and three ambitions in terms of the movement, well, the change in the way that the NHS works. So how do we go about moving care closer to our communities? How do we make better use of technology? And how do we prevent sickness rather than just treating sickness? And I think they're all things that very much align to our plans and ambitions that we've got within Essex. And I know it's something that very much is coming up through the Care and Communities Commission as well. I think the key challenge is clearly there is an opportunity for us as a Health and Wellbeing Board to input our views into this process. But equally, I think the real question is how do we move these ambitions forward at some pace? And so we've got the future shift work that North East Essex and Suffolk have been working on, which I think kind of very much links in with this. I know from a Mid and South Essex perspective, we'll be shortly bringing our medium-term plan proposals and work, which aims to kind of focus on how do we deliver in this space successfully. But obviously, I think the key challenge as always is these are ambitions that we've had for some time. And the real question and challenge to, I think, us all in the NHS is how do we actually translate those ambitions into real practical delivery on the ground within the constraints that we know that we face. And so we know particularly that capital is a challenge in terms of how we can go about improving general practice estate and community estate if we're going to successfully achieve less shift. We know that there's going to need to be much greater standardisation and optimisation in the use of technology across the way that the NHS provides and works. And equally, we need to think about how do we join up much more effectively around, I think, the prevention agenda. So I think we've got some good examples of joint work, but I think there's the opportunity for us as we move into this next phase to think about how can we work with Sarah and colleagues in terms of doing that. And I had a really positive conversation following up on the healthy weight discussion that we had the last one of these meetings. I think there is much more we can do in terms of how we mainstream that into the way that the NHS thinks and works on a very practical level. So I think it's something we should support in terms of the ambitions. I think the challenge is and the key debate is how do we actually translate this into actual reality on the ground, and so our communities and patients and the people who work within services really feel it. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Tom. Very clear. Thank you for the paper. I've got lots of questions, of course, but who'd like to go first? Sarah?
Yeah, certainly. So I absolutely agree. It's something that we should support. It's a really big opportunity. It's also, as you say, a big challenge. I think all of these shifts have interdependencies and they aren't new to us. I guess for me, the recommendation in the paper, which is about where do we bring all this together, because there's a balance between what needs to be place-based and what could be broader Essex-wide. Obviously, as you've already mentioned, the interdependencies with the public health team. So my question, and I'm sorry if I don't know this yet, but is there a forum exists already where we can bring people together to look at how we facilitate that partnership working and integration with what we've already got, so we can focus on what we need to do differently? And if not, do we want a subgroup of the Health and Wellbeing Board where we can have the conversations about how we take this forward together? And that's not to add meetings in people's diaries. It's really just about, let's not miss this opportunity and let's build on what we've already got and do that in the best way we can.
Do you want to answer that, Tom, or do you want to get some?
So I think we've got various forums which work in various ways. I'm not sure we've got something which comes together at a greater Essex level, because obviously we've got 3 upper tier authorities in Essex. And so I do wonder whether there is an opportunity, particularly with a view to LGR, in terms of us trying to establish something to help coordinate some of this work, because equally what we don't want is, you know, any reorganisation of any services in the NHS or in local authorities to kind of delay the work. And so if we can get that agreement to kind of work together strategically, and I think through some of the conversations that we've had already, actually I think there's an appetite to do that. I think we just need to sit down and design something that will work and put this all together.
Okay. Should I take that as an action then, John, to meet with Tom and...
I'd just like to hear from other people,
Yeah,
but
sure.
certainly. Congratulations, Tom. 11 minutes and we got the first mention of LGR. I'll be very happy to say a word later in the meeting about where we are on all this speculation, so that's fine. I mean, I think from me, you see, what was very interesting, Sarah and Tom, there is a piece for me thinking, you are all the ICB statutory organisations, you are charged with developing a 10-year plan. That is your responsibility. So always the question for me comes, so how can we, as you say, Sarah, work together, both getting a sort of a level of appropriate level of consistency, not identicality, but equally what matters then is changing a plan to reality. And therefore, how can we work together? So if you're happy to have that forum, but then you're quite right, Tom. If you're going to start taking that and saying, if there were to be a positive announcement about LGR, that would be a useful thing to create. So I'll leave you, and that's an action then with you, Sarah, and you, Tom, to have early conversation. That'd be super, because the actual submissions have to go in soon. That's different from what Tom said, Sarah, about whether this Health and Wellbeing Board would wish to play into the consultation process. Or whether we should leave it to the individual organisations to do so. Really.
do you want me to respond?
I would not want to stop you.
I think there's value as a Health and Wellbeing Board for us to put a response into the consultation, because it's an important partnership forum and we want to be able to look at how we offer our support to this as a big system change. But I'm happy to have views from others in terms of whether people think that's appropriate.
When does the consultation close?
I don't know, but
you now ask me. I think we've got a few more weeks for it to run. I can let you know.
But I need to bring your subgroup together quite quickly to have that sort of a conversation. I wouldn't want to put this in for the sake of it. I would only want to put it in because something meaningful to say. Nick, whether the directors of social care have a view on sending something in either of the name of the council?
You mean the National Association of Directors, John? Or,
sorry?
Do you mean me or the National Association of Directors? On the policy.
You answer whichever hat you want.
Yes, we'll have a view on everything inevitably. So, I was just going to say on the Health and Wellbeing Board responding, Sarah, we probably need to check with our monitoring officer. So remembering that the Health and Wellbeing Board is a formal subcommittee of the council. So if it ever takes a position that's different to that of the council, that would be an interesting conundrum for the monitoring.
Sure, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Nick. Okay, so we'll sort that out. Other points on this, what Tom said in his paper about 10-year plan?
Hello, Claire Angel, Deputy Director for Babies, Children, Young People and SEN for Mid and South Essex. I just wanted to add we have, through our Growing Well programme board, formally responded to the consultation. We had every member of our partner or in the system represented. They've helpfully designed a workshop in a box package that they've disseminated to partners to collate responses. So we've done that piece of work for CYP and I will share that evidence with Tom and colleagues.
Thank you. Thanks. Anybody else? So we note the.
Sorry, I think Jane
Gardner, yes.
Thanks, Chair. Tom, really welcome it. That's the first thing I'd want to say. And of course, as you would expect, I will be responding. Really welcome the links to domestic abuse. Obviously from the perspective of chairing the Southend Essex and Thurrock Domestic Abuse Board. And I really appreciate the shift to kind of away from treatment and to prevention. So would maybe like to see the piece around suicide prevention more brought out in the document, but we'll respond accordingly. Thanks, Chair.
No, thank you, Jane. And we must be due suicide prevention updates, you know.
Do you know, I was sitting here thinking the same as I was talking. So,
great minds.
Yeah.
I'm sure we've recently done an audit that means we can bring that to the Health and Wellbeing Board as part of an update and then looking at the actions around the plan.
There may well be space at the next meeting, I think, looking at the forward plan, Jane. So either March or May. Okay.
Cool.
If there's nobody else, then we note the development of the plan. We are agreed on the device for Sarah and Tom to liaise, both in terms of considering whether there should be any submission from this board, bearing in mind what Nick said, but also the ongoing engagement, not just in the consultation, but in the development and implementation. And you then come to the future shift paper from SNE, and I would have to say, just, you know, if you look at the two together, don't they fit? I mean, it seems to me that the future shift is very much in the 10-year plan territory. So despite the fact, particularly given you're still in crutches, so I'm really sorry you're having a bad time. I think you're talking to this.
Thank you, John. So I'm just going to pass around. I brought it along because I recognise that the future shift document is rather long. So we do have a few. We don't have very many of them, but some hard copies. So I'll pass those along and let's come first serve for those. This does follow on very nicely from Tom's paper about the planned update to the 10-year plan. But this was actually some work that we began in advance. In fact, it was about a year ago that we were having some conversations about that led to developing what essentially is an update to our ICS integrated care strategy. So, and the concepts are very similar. I must admit, I wish I patented the term kind of future shift a little bit earlier on because it then appeared in the 3 shifts. I also wish I patented no more sticking plasters as well, because that was a term that we were using as well in the system, but and all of that came through as well. And we have actually submitted the future shift document into that national consultation because we think certainly was when it was discussed by our Integrated Care Partnership Committee, we felt very strongly that this was a good contribution into that national debate. And lastly, I just want to say thank you very much to colleagues from the other 2 integrated care systems who we invited from the outset to be part of the conversations about future shift and stuck with that, and we'll pass those conversations as they went on through last year, and we very much hope in the way that Tom's just suggested that we can continue to work together around this going forward. So essentially what this is, and Tom set me up rather well for this, is that we already had an integrated care strategy for the SNE system, and essentially the way you would sum that up is to describe it as being about achieving what's known as a left shift in terms of the health well-being for the population. So we talked for many years. The DNA goes right back to the very beginnings for us as an integrated care system about the importance of the best outcomes for everyone in the population. The left in the left shift is about that, the importance of prevention and supporting more people to live well for longer. We talked for a long time about thinking differently about moving care and resources to more local neighbourhood community settings, the importance of addressing both health and healthcare inequalities. And also we've been talking for many years about the importance of can-do health and care, different partners coming together and making the system work better for the people that we serve. So we already had that in place really essentially as our integrated care strategy. But what we've done with Future Shift is to try to address that all-important question about how do we really get moving? How do we really, start to get the system transforming in the way that we want it to? Particularly given the fact that in the context that we're living in today, we are 89 seconds away from doomsday, but we have a changing world, a changing population. The state of health and care is not what we would want to see. We've got a lot of learning in our system and across the country about what's worked well, what's not worked so well. And we also know that we've got lots of opportunities, particularly in the realms of science, medicine, technology. So what we did was we used something called the 3 Horizons framework to really start to kind of do a bit of a deep dive in terms of that journey from now into a future where we would see our vision as achieving that left shift for the population. And 3 Horizons methodology is really helpful with that because it helps us to embrace the complexity of that journey, the complexity of moving away from ways that we might work at the moment and what might be worth conserving in the future, and bringing in a more viable way of working in the future, and also how we approach the work of innovation. So in the document, you'll see that there are it's set out as a why, a how, and a what. So the why sets out some of the kind of drivers. It talks about the ways in which our population is driving and changing and so on. But when we get into the how, there were 5 areas that we identified that we thought were really important and we need to pay more attention to in terms of how we make that journey into the future. So those are about how we lead and work together. We talked about the importance of further embedding collaboration and that sense of collective accountability, leading with candour, being brave and taking risks, the importance of psychological and cultural safety, compassionate leadership, and how do we get that sense of intuitive can-do leadership so that those at the front line really can lead the system for the person in front of them. The second is about how care is delivered in a more viable future, and this is where I've said I think that I found that everyone was sort of almost in danger of violently agreeing about this, that the future really needs to be about more local, holistic and seamless care, care led by people and communities, more technology-enabled self-managed care, developing a workforce for the future, and also building trust with the population. And I'm really grateful to colleagues involved with the Essex Care and Communities Commission who came and spoke at the Future Shift events. You'll see that we reference as a case study in the document as well. A third issue that we identified was that one, and I know this came up at Health Wellbeing Board recently, about how do we make that difficult decision about how we invest our time and resources. If we're so busy at the moment servicing the status quo, how do we get our heads up and how do we make sure that we actually are moving on from the status quo into that more viable future? So what we've started to unpack there is the importance of investing in system working, paying more attention to how we manage things like risk governance and regulation, financial investment, of course, incredibly important, commissioning and transformation, and also what we measure as well. And again, we've gone into that in some detail in terms of some ideas about how we might think about those differently going forward. And then in terms of how we innovate and learning from the world of innovation, innovating based on what's called the jobs to be done, which is really genuinely, really understanding the job to be done. We had an excellent contribution from Mid and North Essex Mind who presented at the Future Shift events and talked about the fact the voluntary community sector, for example, are key innovators. They understand, they always work from the principle of what's the job to be done and innovate around that. So this is not, when I talk about innovation, this is not just about new technological treatments and so on. It's about the voluntary community sector, other areas where we've got untapped potential, perhaps in social care providers, in the world of advanced practice or allied health professionals, and then of course around science, technology and new treatments. And then the other area that we really kind of zeroed in on is really thinking hard about how we approach system transformation and really embedding the principles that we know that successful transformation involves building the right foundations, then starting to do things smarter, but then stretching ourselves a lot further into perhaps doing smarter things and then reimagining health and care. And we know we're on that journey in many ways as a system, and we've built some foundations, people beginning to do things in a smarter way, but we think we could go much further than that. And there's lots of examples about that. Finally, the document then explores 6 areas where we think, these are things that we can do, if you like. These are areas where we can really, we're already aiming to make a difference. So it's around we can co-produce and co-deliver with people and communities. And this is really important because we know that when we do that, we get much better outcomes. So it's really important. And again, the document goes into quite some detail about how we do that, how we can start to approach that in a different way and really embed that as a principle through everything that we do. We can prevent ill health, inequalities and injustice, and we've really lent into that in terms of those examples around obviously prevention, for example, the importance of ageing well and inequalities, but also that important ingredient around injustice. We've done a lot of work around something called uncomfortable truths to really lean into that and to embed that in the work that we do as well. We can deliver more holistic neighbourhood-based care, and that involves, so for example, some of the general practice is the absolute cornerstone of neighbourhood working, and so that sustainability of general practice and building that in, but also the importance of integrated neighbourhood teams, which we've talked about at Health Wellbeing Board before, voluntary and community sector in particular, and then other areas of neighbourhood-based care. Making more use of technology and innovation, I won't go on about, but there's lots in there, everything from AI to robotics. The new orthopaedic centre at Colchester is now open, Dane Clare Marks Centre. Some colleagues were there last week. We've been trying to capture some of this stuff, a little film, so you get the T-shirt, the book, the film, the whole works on Future Shift, but really exciting stuff, talking about how they're using robotic surgery. They're really starting to tackle that waiting list and that backlog at that new orthopaedic centre in Colchester. We can learn from data, evidence, knowledge and intelligence, of course the importance of linked data, but also learning from other sources of data and things like the community voices and research, the REND work, which is across, I think, all 3 ICSs. I know Mid-Essex will be working really closely with you around that area. It's important. And then lastly, the all important need to make better use of our existing resources. So of course the work around anchor organisations, so that work around Essex Partners is really important, and so on as well. So I'm not going to go into more detail about what's in the document, but just to finish off to say this, which is that what you won't find in the Future Shift document is a detailed action plan, and there's a really good reason for that, because it's a document that's deliberately not overly prescriptive. We have agreed and understood that we need to devolve decision making to those best placed to make decisions and enable us to manage complexity locally. So this does set out a kind of really powerful set of principles that we should probably hold ourselves collectively accountable for, now reflecting in all of the work that we do, whether it's in our alliances, whether it's in our neighbourhood teams. As I said, the document does very strongly reflect the national direction of travel, and we hope is a contribution to that. And I think, it has got broader applicability, certainly across Greater Essex, certainly across perhaps more widely in the East of England, and perhaps nationally as well, as that 10-year plan starts to take shape. If you didn't manage to get one of the hard copies, and I know it is attached to the papers, but it's on the front page of our ICS website, and we've also produced an easy read version, a summary and at a glance, and even bringing right up to date around new technology. We used the new generation artificial intelligence to generate a podcast. So if nothing else, have a listen, because it blew me away that it wasn't a human being that produced that. We're continuing the conversation, and so over the next year we're certainly planning some deeper conversations on many of these issues. So for example, culture and leadership, untapped potential, and technology and innovation, and we'd really like to extend an invitation to everybody to come and join us for those conversations and to continue, I think, what's a really key discussion at the moment. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Susanna. Much of interest there. So we can start with Ian Davidson online. Ian.
Thank you. And Susanna, thank you very much indeed for the presentation of the document. It is absolutely brilliant. I just want to sort of reinforce a couple of things which you said there, which brings out is about it's about the whole of public sector in terms of the delivery. It's not just about what's health doing about it or what certain sectors. It's about the whole of public health, and Susanna highlighted that in some of her script there. I think that one of the important things is that in terms of looking the long-term future, things like the Wellbeing Centre, the Diagnostic Centre, the work we do in primary school, is how we're going to get that left shift, how we're going to get that upfront work, and actually get the buy-in. And I think that the alliances are going to be really important to that, because we have all the partners around the table. And sorry, John, but this is going to be the second time of mentioning it, but if we go through the LGR, is about making sure, with different authorities coming together, making sure that we don't lose those quality of integrated working, which we have now with Colchester and tendering across with the alliances in whatever format it will be in the future.
No need to apologise, Ian, absolutely. We mustn't lose all that we've achieved, and indeed far from it, look to build it up from the roots. Other points, comments, questions?
Tony Coles and Nick.
Tony Coles and then Nick. Tony?
Yes, I just wanted to give an opportunity to give a perspective from Hertfordshire and West Essex, and particularly West Essex partnership. So all of what we said is very consistent with all what we're trying to achieve for our medium-term plans and to deliver that left shift. And what I was thinking might be helpful is that we are doing a particular piece of work around our adult population in what care close to home means, and have done some intensive work over the last 6 months within the ICB and particularly within our partnership space about what does that practically mean. And we're in our round of planning for next year. We are producing integrated delivery plans at each of our health and care partnership levels, which is about the practicality about how we're actually going to deliver that left shift locally. So what I was going to propose is that we'll complete our plans by the end of March, whether there's a future health and wellbeing board where we actually bring an example of how we are actually implementing some of this sort of left shift and the ambition. So just an offer to the wellbeing board whether we could have that.
Okay, Susanna, can I just go to Nick before I bring you in? Right, Nick.
Thank you very much, John. So first of all, Susanna, it's welcome documents, really good documents. So thank you very, very much. Doesn't says all the right things. I'm fascinated to understand, and we'll all, I suppose, watch with interest. We'll see the Secretary of State's 3 shifts alongside the Casey Commission changing the rules of the game if it ever happens on social care funding. And then, of course, LGR changing the fundamental sovereign units that will do this, how all that will fit together. But I think what you've helpfully done is said to us what will matter when all that comes together. I think it's really valuable. I would just say, as we go forward working with you, a few areas I would like to emphasise. One would be the principles which are in the document, but I think we need to draw out. I think we're all agreed, and that's fundamental shifts. The role of residents and their ability to shape services, so co-production and maintaining choice and control, because they're the USPs of adult social care. That's what differentiates us. And the final bit for me is, and I was just thinking about Ian Davidson's comments, how do we move this from being something that is about the public sector working together and it being a feeling and looking, which isn't its intention, but could be its outcome, feeling and looking like something that's very institutional and top down, and turning it into something that truly comes up from our communities, which I think in SNE and all our ICBs actually through the alliance models, we've got the infrastructure to do that. It's just not letting go of that as the bigger force.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, you see, to me, Nick, that's why Susanna said there's no detailed plan here. It feels to me it's the backdrop against which others operate. But Susanna, your reaction so far? I'd be particularly keen to hear from the alliances and the other ICBs actually as to if this has been adopted by SNE, would others wish to move in a complementary way? That's really. But Susanna?
So thank you very much. I mean, I completely agree with everything that's said there. And every time I look at the document at 94 pages, I think of another kind of 94 that we could kind of add. So I think you're absolutely right. I mean, what's staggering about this is that it really still only scratches the surface of some of the areas that we we need to better understand. And what's encouraging is that lots of things that are going on, they fit really nicely around this. So, for example, the Care and Communities Commission has lent into those issues around how do we get into kind of movement really of residents creating the momentum for change. Completely agree, and I think that the point about kind of choice and control and so on, that's where we need to get into the thing about co-delivery, don't we? We need to start to think about where we've got untapped potential in our people and communities, if you like, and we could really start to unlock that in terms of the way in which we work going forward. And completely agree. Home first, with all of that. Perhaps we could have another chapter, but I'll email you afterwards. Anyway, don't worry about it. So I think what you're underlining is that this is only the start of a conversation. This is only the start of and it has unpacked. It was useful. What we've started to do is to kind of explore some things which I suppose are uncomfortable truths about how do we achieve transformation. When we're thinking about what we're planning to do this year, what's really important to do. Okay, we need to remember that we've got to continue to embed the foundations. We need to remember that even though we're doing some good stuff, perhaps in some of the ways we're working at the moment, there's further we could go. There was a bit of learning had around integrated neighbourhood teams where we talked about the fact that we tried to introduce a pilot for something called Birdsong. It's in the document at quite an early stage, and it didn't work. It was in West Suffolk. It really didn't work very well. And the learning from that was quite painful in some places. But what we recognised was that having now done some things like the One Team programme, invested in building the right foundations for those teams, they've come together. They're now at a stage where they're interested in looking at those different models. So I suppose what it's really brought to us is starting to have a bit more discipline, and resources are limited, our time's limited, and can we go about the way we make this journey in a way that's meaningful, because we're all desperate to kind of, start to see that left shift take place, and we know that's the right way forward. But, we also know that it's extremely difficult to do, particularly when under the pressures that we're facing at the moment.
Thank you. It's interesting. Others? Sorry? To me. And Tom, I'm just welcome to get your thoughts on following your 10-year plan, please. But Paul, good morning again.
Thank you. Tony has just said.
Hold on a second, Paul.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I just remind you about the sensitivity of the microphones? Yes. Should we let the people come in, Paul?
You need to sit down. They've been standing very patiently for some time.
Well, do come and take a seat.
Right, Paul. Yeah, I just wanted to build on Tony's comments and offer, really. I think if you looked at almost any ICB in the country, there would be a version of the discussion that Suzanne has described and which is documented in this really good paper. I think what matters, however, about this is how you transact and enact it, how you actually create the conditions in which this begins to become the way in which you work. The reality is that this is an area which the NHS and partners have been in discussions about for a very long time, and yet have not succeeded in bringing to reality. And I think what we're very keen from a Hertfordshire West Essex perspective to do is to talk you through how the medium-term plan that we adopted last year is providing a framework for us to move forward on our agenda around care closer to home, which is very resonant with what colleagues in SNE have set out today, which has at its heart looking at the opportunities around adult community services, and particularly how we really, it's an interesting point Suzanne made about the three horizon model. And in essence, it says quite a lot of the future sits in the present. It's about identifying the things you're doing today that actually need to be part of that future. And undoubtedly the creation of neighbourhood teams is a component of that. The establishment and embedding of various models of social prescribing, absolutely critical to asset-based delivery as well. I think those components are there in Hertfordshire West Essex, and what we are doing through the contract processes that we will be going through this year is establishing a consistency and equity in terms of how we are approaching delivery of services across the whole patch, which is really important, but also making sure that we do achieve that shift. I just want to put on the table, the real challenge within the NHS is that we are running incredibly hot in our acute sector, consume vastly more resource than we currently allocate to them, at a time when we need to be able to reallocate resources to enable the capacity to be grown to do what Suzanne has described and what we are doing in Hertfordshire and West Essex over the course of this 12-month period. And that will be painful because it will mean that you stop doing things or you can't do things or you stand still. And when you stand still in our current environment, the fire that is burning will just burn us out. So we have to be very, very clear that there's a real challenge at the heart of this. And the challenge is that we have to start enacting the change, not just talk about the change.
Absolutely. I'm sure we'd all endorse that. Guess we.
I was just going to say, Sarah wants to come in. I just think it's worth welcoming the students who are here from Harlow. Who are here for the
Good morning, all of you. Nice to see you all. And I know that Graham Butland also has arrived from the Mid-Essex Alliance. So to you, welcome, Graham. The Harrow students are, we're coming to write them next, I think, so it's well timed. I'll come to Sarah, but Tom, did you want to say anything of just hearing
so I think
Paul's just said?
Very much agree with Paul. I think it links back to the conversation with the work that Suffolk North has done points to this in terms of how do we translate the ambition into reality? I think the approach has got to be, we need to be really clear what we mean by place and what we mean by integrated neighbourhood teams. Secondly, we need to be really clear about which are the population groups we want to impact and benefit in what order, because I think there's been some fantastic, and you can see within the Alliance reports later on the agenda, in terms of there's some fantastic examples of great partnership working at a local level, which has benefited some people, but what we're not currently seeing in Mid and South Essex is the at scale benefit that we need to see. And so we need to almost industrialise very clearly in terms of the cohort populations we want to see, the evidence base in terms of what works, and encourage place to do that. The way they may do that will differ, because actually the community infrastructure that we have in Mid-Essex is very different from, say, the community infrastructure we have, say, in the Battersea and Brentwood patch. So the way that happens, but doing it at some scale so we can start to see the impact in terms of utilisation of services, and so we can start to move the needle and facilitate the transfer of resources that we need to see, and build on that. And that's very much the thinking that we're doing in Mid and South Essex. Dan might want to say a little bit more, but But I think that's this next step that we're now moving into, given the developments and the thinking that's been done, and learning, I think, that's been gathered over the course of the last few years since we've been working in this way.
Thank you, Tom. Sarah?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things building on what's already been said. I'm going to probably show my age now, because I don't know if any of you remember the Wanless report, but that looked at the, what would actually save the NHS and help us save money. And actually the scenario that worked the best was about culture change and getting the public to use services differently, which I think that means there's a really big role potentially for Health Watch, our voluntary sector, and different partners to look at how we do that. And then the other thing is, because we're relying so much on culture change to make this work, I think we've often fallen into the trap of trying to release funding for prevention and then expecting prevention to suddenly have that impact that then means people stop using services and release further funding. When actually in reality, we probably need to double run a system where we build up the prevention offer and gradually move people into doing things in a different way, which then means we've got a sustainable change in terms of how people use services. But obviously with financial constraints, that makes that very difficult. So I think sometimes I think we overestimate the opportunity from taking that more linear action, when actually if we were in the sort of place we would want to be, there would be the opportunity to have the new system running with the old system that gradually then brought the curve down.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, we're just unrealistic about how quickly the work on prevention will have impact, of course, absolutely. I'm hearing a sense that, Susanna, who could argue against this?
Nick wanted to comment.
Oh, Nick, sorry, hello.
I was just actually going to respond to Sarah. I think absolutely right. I'm sitting beside Jane Gardner. John and Jane and I worked together when the Wellness report was published, I think, and that was 20.
Yeah.
But I'm just reflecting on two things. One, we have seen a proportional shift in resources from community and primary care to acute services over 2 decades now.
Yeah.
And I'm still not sure what's going to stop that. And the second thing is I use the word system, those systems or countries that have done prevention really well, so that they have fixed their health demand or at least turned the curve, have not done it through their national health services. They've done it through taking the money and through doing it entirely independently to the kind of methodological fixes that need to go on in hospitals around pathways and so on and so on. And I do wonder how the current pressure you're all under to reduce your waiting lists is actually going to support the agendas you've just described. Because what it's doing is it's burning your resources in the acute system at some rate and not creating the space for you to kind of make those community interventions. So just a bit of realpolitik around this. The aspirations we've got are absolutely right. The structural forces around it are very unhelpful at the moment.
So, understood, absolutely. This council has probably been talking about it for much longer than a decade and a bit, but it certainly has been, as with the Who Will Care report, which is very much about how you get whole system bottom-up cultural change, and that's the beast that Beverly is tackling now with the Caring Communities Commission. I think we can all establish the what, it's the how, and making the how happen. And you can't expect the NHS to it all, of course you can't. I'm with you all the way. So, I've heard everybody thank Suzanne and Sneha for the work that's been done. I love the way you said it was the start of the conversation. I think we've had a year lot of conversations on it, Susanna, to get to this point, but I know what you mean. I was very much welcome, Paul, your offer of a briefing on how your medium-term plan in Hearts and West is operating. We will not solve the problem of turning ambition into reality in this room. We've sometimes wondered what our role is, and at least visibility and understanding of all that is going on will always enhance the quality of decisions. And so if as a result of this, Susanna, and from you, Paul and Tom in due course, we actually have that full understanding, then we can hopefully, through osmosis, see things really develop. Sarah, I'll be looking to you. Your challenge that you and I agreed was how to ensure public health has the maximum influence on the well-being of the county.
Yes.
Challenge you've happily accepted, and you have the relationships in here to see how we can do this, and working with the Caring Communities Commission in due course. Okay.
Yes.
So there is a clear item for the forward plan from Paul, and we will continue to follow and track, Susanna, what's going on in Sneha.
Could I just add
Jane,
thank you. So I've listened to the conversation, and I don't disagree with it, what anybody says. What I really like about this, Susanna, is that sometimes you have to start somewhere and you have to be brave. And I think this document helps us think differently about where we want to get to, because I think you're right, Chairman. I think we've been talking about this all for so long, haven't we? And I'm not saying that's wrong, but we have to move at some point. And I think this helps us think about what we need to do next. So I really welcome it. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
That's all right, Jane. Yes, and sometimes you just, as you were saying, don't start with don't start with the whole system. Small examples of great practice can have big consequences over time. ants and rubber tree plants from my childhood comes to mind. Right, thank you. It's a very good song. I think we're coming to the Alliance update.
We are, yes.
If it's all right with the Alliance directors, I'll invite, who's here? We've got Dan. Well, Ian, you're going to be the major one. Who else is here from the other Alliance? Tony. Right. If you want to just speak briefly down, Tony, to your pieces. I have asked Sarah to work with you to try and get into a piece. I think we leave you to do the Alliance updates when I actually think that's a bit hard, and we have lots of people going to the county. So I'd like us to stop dumping it on you so that we can move to a consistent format. So very brief updates from you and anything you want to add to your very full report, Dan. But then basically this is over to Ian for bump to 5. So,
yeah, I mean, if I go first, and then Tony. So not a lot to add to the conversation that's already been taken place this morning. I think the key thing for the Mid and South Essex Alliances very much builds on what Tom said, which is we've done a lot of work, particularly in our places, in our neighbourhood teams, in forming those neighbourhood teams. We have 24 that cover the 1.2 million people of Mid and South Essex. I think the key for us now is moving from, I guess, small areas of good practice. So I could give you really good examples of managing frail elderly individuals in Benfleet, or excellent examples of managing people with diabetes in the Colne Valley where Anna works. But as Tom said, they're specific islands of good practice. What we've struggled with is to scale that up. And when we're then talking about shifting resource, be that Nick's point from the acute setting to communities to close to patients, or indeed just changing our community contracts or our mental health contracts, we can't do that when we're only impacting 50,000 people or 100,000 people out of a population of 1.2 million. So I think the big focus, and this is somewhat unique since the time of CCGs, is to get all 4 of the alliances in Mid and South Essex, exactly as Tom said, working and targeting the same cohorts of people at the same time so that we bring change across the board that we can then respond to. The only other 2 things I was going to raise, not specific to the alliance update, but it was just off the back of the challenges that we'd been given by the Health and Wellbeing Board previously. The first was just to say that following a steer from Tom, we've introduced fostering policy. If people remember that organisations were challenged to do that, so Tom's very quickly instigated that across the Mid and South Essex ICB, so that's now going through. And then the only other one, Jane, was I was going to update you at some point, but it's worthwhile given what you mentioned earlier, but the focus around controlled drugs in Mid Essex and the issues that we've had, the link to suicide, we've also picked that up locally. But at that point, John, nothing more from me. I'm happy to hand over to Tony and Ian.
That's great. So we will pick up on the suicide piece. Philip, spoke immediately before you said that, your first one.
Fostering was the first.
Yes, thank you for the fostering. We will be coming out to everybody to see how you're progressing with the foster friendly employer pieces. I'll be writing to all participants just to see. This is about quality of children's lives, and the issues grow, they don't diminish. So Alison, is Alison here? And I will in due course be just asking how you're getting on, okay? Tony?
Yeah, just very briefly, obviously you've got Ian and our guests are going to be sharing with you one of their key pieces of work around prevention around our bump to 5. So I'll leave that particular item for them to pick up. But just to sort of build on the conversation about integrated neighbourhood teams, for example, you know, we do have a focus on frailty. We've identified our population that we are going to be picking up, and through our fix INTs are reasonably established in the West Essex partner system, and we are seeing green shoots of having an impact where we have seen a sort of reduction on year in frailty admissions, which is one of the ambitions. It's not consistent across the whole of West Essex, and so we're adapting our model to have a bit more of a targeted approach to really drive the change in the areas of probably greatest need, which is around HARLAC. But consistent again with the messages that have been given this morning, you know, this coming year is about how we build on those foundations and scaling up the impact we have within the system and what services we wrap around those integrated neighbourhood teams, not just from our community providers, from the voluntary sector, but also our acute providers more active in that community space to hold people in the community and avoiding the admissions and the pressures that we're all experiencing in our acutes at the moment. So that's just going to give you that very brief update, and then it's really up to Ian on the prevention.
Okay. We've got Helen Lincoln on the line, our Director of Children's Services. She's either in or risen from her sick bed. Wherever you are, Helen, if you'd been in the room, am I right to think you want to say something about how children issues get greater visibility at the alliances?
Yeah, sorry, I've got a really bad sore throat and chest infection, folks, so very croaky voice. I suppose a couple of the things for me are just making sure that in all plans that the children's long-term health issues are reflected. And I kind of, I am concerned that we make sure when we're talking about this shift to the left, we are thinking about prevention in our children's plans. And can I just say, Tom, thank you for Mid and South Essex fostering friendly. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Helen. And what a wonderful introduction, Ian, to Bump 5, really, if anything's on the prevention agenda. Welcome to you and to the students from Harlow. I pass over.
Thank you very much, Chair. Excuse me, I think I've got a throat as well. Thank you for allowing us to come this morning and just present a very live project, which, as you say, very touches on prevention, children's health and children's lives overall, I think, and their development in those all important early years. I need to share our screen. 1 second. See that. So, as it says on the screen, My Life, Season 1, Bump to 5. The parents of this project, so to speak, are the West Essex Health and Care Partnership, Harlow Futures, education, the voluntary sector has many, many parents that are interested in it. And essentially, I call it Season 1, Bump to 5, because we want eventually to go transition all the way through primary school, into secondary school, and then on into further education and employment. And we picked up on this project, the very basic stuff around it is the all-important information and support provision, the what, where and how people can access it, how the public can access it, service users and so forth. And it's something that we've come up with very much in mind and with the public themselves. There's lots out there, lots of different services, and this has essentially brought it together. And as I say, it is very much work in progress. I'm now going to stop talking and start introducing, because I'm over this side, because I'm emceeing it and also operating the slide, so bear with me. The first person I'm going to bring up, and I will introduce them all, and we haven't got too long, so we'll be very brief, is Katie Kay, who is the Better Births midwife for Hertfordshire and West Essex local maternity and neonatal system. So in other words, Katie, you're at the bump end of this.
Absolutely. Hi, thanks, Ian. So yes, I'm a midwife and I work across Hertfordshire and West Essex in our local maternity and neonatal system. And a large part of my role is to try and support people with their personalised care, to make sure that people have all the information that they need to make the decisions that are right for them. And a few years ago, I'm based at Harlow, and a few years ago, the maternity service at Harlow developed a maternity Padlet to kind of think of it as a digital filing cabinet. Because our people, our staff are, they can't walk around with huge amounts of leaflets, but actually our service users really tell us that they need that information to be able to go away and think about their decisions and have some good evidence-based things to help them with that. So we developed a maternity Padlet. And also it's really handy and useful for our staff to be able to signpost to lots of things that are provided by the maternity service, but information that's provided by NHS England, that's provided by some of our local partners as well, and to have that in one place. So whether that's information about perinatal pelvic health, perinatal mental health, it's all there in one place for people to look at. And then alongside that, within the local maternity and neonatal system, we recognise that those that are most at risk of having the poorest outcomes in our services are people where English isn't their preferred language. And it's really important for our people to be able to signpost to the similar kinds of information, but in a language of people's choice. So there's two screenshots here. One's from the main maternity Padlet and one from the multilingual Padlet that has very similar information, but in 53 different languages. And so when our people are out in community settings, they can open the app, they can ask them to find the flag that most represents the language that you'd like to look at resources in, and make sure that they've got that to refer to. And our service users really do like this way of accessing information. There are other things in development. Our Healthy Together website, I spend a lot of time supporting colleagues to make sure the information there is accurate. But in a digital age, we need to have digital resources, not only for our service users, but also for our people to access. And another big part of the work that I do is about care continuity between maternity services, health visiting and the family support service. And our service users tell us very clearly that they get confused about the professionals that are available to support them in that perinatal first year of life, and who is coming into their home, who will be helping them at their local community hub potentially. And so the work that I do with Essex Child and Family Wellbeing Service and the public health nursing colleagues and family support service colleagues across Hertfordshire is also really important. So I welcome any opportunity to try and create a seamless experience for people as they navigate this life-changing period for them.
Thank you very much, Katie. Without further ado, we'll go to the other end of Bump to Five. I'm going to introduce now Sam Lambert, who's the Deputy Head of Millwards Primary School in Harlow, who will talk a bit about school readiness.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Sam. I've worked in I've worked with children since I was 16 years old. And obviously that's a short space of time. It's a large space of time, so I've seen a lot of change. But what I would say is in the last 4 to 5 years, particularly, the amount of children that are now coming into reception, so they'll be 5 years old, coming into reception with nappies, then are unable to talk. They can talk, but not in sentences. They're unable to play. The toileting is an issue. Obviously, we get a lot of children that come in with special educational needs, so that's a bit different. You expect that for them to be in a nappy, but the other end, you're getting lots of children that are perfectly capable children, but they are still wearing nappies. And so then a large part of our day is then spent toilet training them, teaching them all of that kind of stuff, which then obviously impacts on the rest of the learning which they're expected to do. By the time they reach year 6, obviously they've got SATs to sit, so you're constantly on the back foot. Communication is not great. You've got lots of children that can't speak, lots of children being referred for speech and language. Children are struggling, coming in, being able to play, struggling with their imagination skills. So it's really got a big impact. Last year, I had 5 children in my class of 30 that were in nappies, which I've never had before. The work was carried out across 10 schools in Harlow, looking at all the facts and figures. And every single class had a number of children that were wearing nappies.
So Sam, which school did you say you were?
Millwards.
So you're not I'm taking it from that this is not limited to particular areas of deprivation, or you understand what you say. This was across all 10 schools, did you say?
It was across a sample of 10 schools in Harlow. Yeah. There's also been lots of articles on the news and stuff recently, within the last year, about children coming into school wearing nappies and about just those basic independent skills, not being able to put on coats and not being able to use a knife and fork, all those kind of skills that you would expect a child to be able to do as they're starting school when they're just not ready for it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sam. So what we're doing about it, can I now introduce Angela Cameron, Deputy Head of Service, pre-birth to 19 for the Essex Child and Family Wellbeing Service.
Thank you. So this is the Padlet that we are creating. As Ian said, it's a work in progress. We've had to blank out the pictures because we're currently looking at current provisions for those, but there is some pictures behind those squares. This is the feedback. We've created this based on feedback from parents, families, but also partners across the system. So what we wanted to do is do a continuation of the maternity Padlet. So we wanted to build on the fantastic work of our maternity colleagues and extend the Padlet from antenatal all the way up to 5 years. And as Ian said, the vision is for it to go on further. We wanted to divide the Padlet into age ranges so that parents can find the information easily. So you can see the age ranges are at the top there, and actually the screenshot doesn't show the full extent of the Padlet. We wanted to include typical development milestones, and so some parents were not always aware of their ages and stages of their children's development. And my colleague Sarah English from the Essex Education Partner has been working with me, and she's developed some fantastic parent-friendly resources that would support that for each age. And within this, we also wanted to include ideas, tips and hints about how parents can support their children's development, and that will also be available in the section there. We received feedback from parents, and they say that it wasn't always aware of when they were likely to see a health professional. So we've included a section where it's what to expect and when. So for instance, that would include when parents are likely to see their midwife or colleagues from the Healthy Family Team, health visitor, etc. So just sort of kind of help them know that. And we also really wanted to make it personal to Harlow. We wanted it to be local, place-based support services from across the system. We wanted to include more interactive sort of videos that include children and young people and families from the area of Harlow. And we wanted to try and promote key messages and one-off events and the Padlet really helps us do that quickly. So we can put one-off events that are happening in and around the area. And it really enables us to have a centralised place that links to other platforms and sources of information. For example, the Herts and West Essex ICB Healthier Together website. So we're kind of including all of the other platforms and sort of resources available for families in one place. We really wanted to make sure that the public health messaging that we put on the Padlet was consistent, and not only for the consistency for the families, but also for professionals should they be using it. And the last thing, which is really simple but means an awful lot to families, was around a search function. So to ensure that we include a search function, so when they want to look at a particular subject, they can literally put it in the search bar and be able to search it. We recognise that the Padlet has an awful lot of information and will continue to grow, so we want to make sure that people can access it as easily.
Thank you very much, Angela. And obviously building on from that, and I'm not going to go into too much detail at all now, we've also got Marika Opera sat at the back in the corner there, very quietly, who's the director of the Parenthood in Harlow. So we're working with Marika and other providers across the town in terms of organising these potty training sessions, for example, and some of the more practical stuff. And so we do have that wholesale advice and support. Obviously, we needed to publicise all this, and this is where I can bring in Harlow College. Today I have with us David Jameson, who's a tutor for media and journalism at the college. The college does have a good name in journalism training. And also he has two students with him that have been working with us on the project. Excuse the buzzes on this thing, I don't know how to turn it off. Emily Miller and Molly Durkin. So if you come forward, and then I'll let David explain what they've been doing, and then I'll give you a quick whiz through some of the examples.
Yeah, so as a group, we were briefed to make poster content on different areas from bump to five, or what is suggested for us to look into. So it's oral health, postnatal, many other things as well. So as a class, we sort of come up with different ideas within groups, and they developed, like you see on the board there, different ways to sort of for parents to sort of understand where they can get advice from, which could be used as a Padlet wall and just to promote certain events like America's Parenthood, and the same as Family Hub as well. So I've got Molly and Emily here. So some of the content we're going to see is one of their videos that they've made, which
so I'll just quickly, we will circulate these to people. As I say, it is still work in progress. I'll underline that, but now I can't change the screen. Just gives you an overview. It's kind of, as you can see, carved up into different areas. The postnatal, I think one of those was Amelie's piece of work, if I remember rightly. And then we're looking at milestones. You can see different stages of child development, tummy time, which is all important. Some of the events on the right-hand side, that's Marika's parenthood. We've got messy play, which I know we've also got video footage of that, and so forth. Healthy habits. We have obviously put a big effort and importance on this in relation to healthy diet, but also oral health, which we have an objective in, certainly in Harlow, to reduce, for example, the number of multiple tooth extractions in children aged 5. And then getting ready for school. One of the things, these have all come directly from the students themselves. And then hopefully I can just run this short video.
To answer that's a tough one really, because
not having any motivation to put a brush through your hair or being able to get out of bed.
returning to work was really difficult. I had to have 6 months off.
I wouldn't know how to cope with that, especially if they're on their own as single mums.
And anxiety.
Not feeling you can talk to people about what's going on, feeling you can cope.
A lot of crying, stress.
For me, it felt like everything was different shades of grey.
Yeah, you don't really get a chance to not do anything because you have to keep it together. I've read it online and I've read how women have struggled with it.
Nothing was exciting anymore. And it was only when I went to the doctor they said to me, it sounds like you've got postnatal depression. I'm like, really? It doesn't sound like something I would have.
I do think in this day and age that paternity should be increased to the 14 weeks I've been fortunate to have.
It's like one of the toughest things I've ever had to do. I'd say go to the GP. That's what I think. Yeah, friends as well. Emotional support.
Seek help. Go to your doctor.
Suggest that they see their GP.
Other mums in the family, friends.
Make sure people around you know the signs to look for.
Just speak to people, basically.
And then this very following, just another completely different subject. The students rather did this about dinosaurs. It covers across this is about oral health.
Today, we will be showing Biggie how he should brush his teeth. Biggie should apply the toothpaste to his toothbrush. Biggie, remember not to get angry. Oops, let's try that again. That's better. Anyway, Biggie, let's continue. Biggie now needs to start brushing his teeth in a circular motion for about 2 minutes at least. Don't be a dinosaur, brush your teeth.
There are students in that costume, I think. I did show it to my 20-month-old granddaughter, and she was like, spellbound by it. Thanks very much for giving this opportunity. We have involved dads as well. Some of the students interviewed their own fathers about what it was like for them during early years and when the baby was new and so forth. So there's a lot of work going on, a lot of the background, but I hope this just gives you a taste and welcome up and see any questions.
Well, thank you, Ian, and thanks to everybody. I must apologise to all the professionals here, Katie, Sam, Andrew, because I was only told about students coming. So by students, you can either be offended because I've robbed you of your professional status, or be pleased because I've made you more useful. So, been fascinating, thank you. Questions in the room?
Lee Scott.
Lee, you and anybody else after? I've got one or two.
Well, just a quick question. Has it been about potty training and kids turning up at schools in nappies? Has that got worse over recent years? It has got worse.
Yeah, it's got much worse over the years.
What do you put it down to?
Oh, when I first started teaching, you wouldn't have anyone in your class in a nappy. It was just unheard of. Whereas
It used to be, didn't it? But somebody had to be potty trained before it started school.
yeah, and quite often that's the case with nursery as well. Because so my setting, I have a nursery and a reception, and we're doing our best to encourage parents for when they start nursery, so when they start with us at 3, to have potty trained their child. But yet we're still getting children coming into the reception from elsewhere, not from our nursery, that are still wearing nappies. It's just progressively worse and worse.
We used to have a policy in place at school which said children should be trained before they could start. If we still had that policy in place now, we wouldn't have the numbers to fill the nursery and have the funding to fund the nursery. So that policy had to almost change so that there was the appropriate number of children for the nursery.
The extra pressure that's putting on teachers.
Well,
unacceptable.
It also comes back to the readiness of the child to be educated. If it's sitting in the nappy, needed changed and so on a minute. And you come back to all those facets. Actually, my wife taught in a very deprived part of Birkenhead 50 years ago, and she did have nappy. She was horrified when I told her about this because she thought that we got past that. But it says something about parenting. And if anybody ever wants to come to the co-parenting panel, that's where we see issues like this being discussed, as Beverly, you would be able to say. I think I want to ask about scalability. So you've done all this work. You're clearly demonstrating things need to be done. Maybe I should ask this of you, Ian. So where does this go, and what would you be recommending about it being scaled up across the county or across the ICB?
So I think it does, because it's multi-agency, multi-sector. It does, obviously, like a lot of these things, you can build it, but it needs maintaining. We've got to keep it. So we'll be looking at how, certainly in Harlow, I'm very proud to say that we have got very strong, almost like a family relationship between the sectors, and I'm seeing people nodding at me, hopefully. But it does rely on that. We find there are ways that we can evolve and share that ownership of it and how we can make it work. It's not just about the information here. As we all know, we can signpost people to things, but if there's nothing there on offer, that's not much use. So there's a lot of work to do in the background, and how it links in, particularly with other initiatives that we have under the way in town. We've just recently, a week ago, last Monday, we launched our new 5 Dinners meal planning platform, which is available to everybody free in Harlow, everybody living and working there. And we had over 500 people sign up in the first few days. So we're looking to grow that as well. And then working very closely with other partners, particularly in public health. I was with Emily Fallon talking about it this morning upstairs, oral health, but then in the education world particularly as well. Because I think I'm right in saying, Sam, aren't I? Your GLD, or level of development, age of 5, that's it. You know, it really does set the tone for life. So this is the really critical, important part of our lives. And we want to build on this and take it forward in terms of transitioning. But actually, once you've cracked it, my experience, many of these things, they're quite simple to do. It's the obvious. You've got to take people with you and involve the public. And if we can do that and put something on we know is going to work, it will sell, as they say in retail, and people will come and make use of it. Then hopefully we'll start seeing the benefits. And I'm really pleased. I just want to acknowledge the support with Harlow College today, because there are some, I know Paul Burstow and Tony Coles were there when we briefed students. There's some 60 or 70 students in the room there, and they really do want to get involved. This is valuable experience for them, and hopefully many of them will continue to grow, prosper, and stay and work in Harlow in their chosen careers. Thank you.
School readiness is lifelong impact and the ability to be in the conditions which promote learning. If there are no more questions,
Susanna.
Sorry?
Susanna.
Susanna?
I just want to say I love it. I mean, the focus on prevention is just wonderful, but I always just love the pragmatism of it as well, and the simplicity. But I've just spotted that Dr. Tamber Allen, who's our Deputy Medical Director from our ICB and the GP, and you've got to focus on children and young people. And I'm planning to chat with Tamber afterwards about whether or not we could do something similar or learn from or adopt, maybe still with pride, some of what you've been doing in West Essex, because I think it'd be really good. So thank you very much indeed for sharing.
And as you're aware, we do have, I know Ian's online, I think we do have a kind of a twinning relationship blossoming now between Harlow and Tendring, and we are swapping stuff. Your very successful STEAM events, we're going to replicate that in Harlow later this year involving Kerry Goosetree and so on. Yeah.
Well, the vision of blossoming twinhood between Harlow and Tendring makes me feel warm. People will bite as long as it's not a secret, and that's the point. You know, if people don't know about this sort of work, we've always said 0 to 5, school readiness, maximum lifelong impact. So I'll always begin to hear about how we can take this work forward. Can I just thank every one of you from Harlow for joining us today. You're very welcome to stay for the next item on the agenda, which is actually about children's well-being. We'll be taking a break at 11:45, so if anybody does want to stay on children's well-being, children's mental health, but if you are going, I will pause proceedings. Thank you very much for coming. Just remind everybody, if you're moving around in the room, there's microphones here, microphones don't. Right, so we're now going on to the issue, as I said, about children's early years and well-being. We have Catherine Thompson from our public health team. Where are you, Catherine?
I'm over here.
Hello.
This side. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Spence. Perfect segue. Really fantastic to be part of the conversation today around prevention. So I wanted to start by saying we know that 75% of mental health disorders are established by the age of 24. So prevention and early intervention in childhood and adolescence is absolutely key, but we know it's complicated. So there are multiple factors which influence emotional well-being and mental health for babies, children and young people. Some of those might be around attachment and the relationship they have with a parent, very much in the early years. This is being highlighted. That bonding is really, really important in setting that relationship off on the right foot, so that it is a protective factor for a child's emotional well-being and mental health. And there are a host of negative factors which can impact on children and young people, as highlighted in the paper. We know that there are evidence-based recommendations on what we can do in terms of prevention and early intervention, and they're highlighted in the paper. And there's also a short summary of some of the activities that public health are taking against those evidence-based recommendations. I appreciate the paper's long, so thank you for sticking with it. And essentially, it's not meant to be an exhaustive list of everything that's happening kind of across the system. We know, as I say, that it is complicated and there needs to be action by multiple agencies, and there is activity happening across education, voluntary community, faith sector, as well as the NHS, to name a few, although it's not listed in the paper. And I think, kind of given the point of the conversation so far, really, there are 3 questions in the paper that I'd really welcome your feedback on. So your experiences of existing services in the prevention, early intervention space, which are provided or co-commissioned by public health, whether you've noticed any gaps in the space around emotional wellbeing and mental health, and opportunities for collaboration, and then how as a system we can go that step further in terms of really ensuring our families, children, babies have got the best start around emotional health and well-being. So that's it from me, Chair, and I really could welcome comments, reflections on the questions posed in the paper. Thank you.
Well, Catherine, it was indeed a very long paper, wasn't it? By golly, it was very interesting to, if you haven't stuck with it, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you've got buckets of paper to get, but it is well worth sticking with it just to understand the totality of what goes on. But the fact is, we're not yet having the impact we would wish to have, are we? And so where could we do more of this? Where should we do less of this? Where should we stop doing? Which weaknesses can you identify, or gaps can you identify that need filled? Would that be a fair way to put it, Catherine?
Perfect, thank you, yes.
Oh, perfect. I'm not often told I'm perfect. Very encouraging. Blossoming and perfect in half an hour. Right, questions, points, comments? This is horrible for a chairman, really. It was a very, now you could take this, Catherine, as a great compliment, because everyone thinks it's such a brilliant paper, that everything's absolutely covered.
Sarah Troop and yeah, sorry.
Zoe Oddy.
Sarah?
And then Zoe.
Yeah, I'm putting on a parent hat here, if that's okay, just very briefly. My little boy's neurodivergent. What we found as an unintended side effect of the really good HAF programme, the holiday activity programme, is because that's targeted at children who are lower income, the fact the clubs, quite rightly, have got all this funding here to do these clubs. So they'll go and do those. But because they're means tested, it means my little boy is no longer eligible for those clubs, so he can't go, and they're not putting anything in place for him. So those holiday clubs have pretty much disappeared for neurodivergent children who are not low income. So that's a parental observation. So it's quite a frustration for me, because then I can't find anywhere that he can go and get the right support. So that's just a.
And does that exclusion, if you'll forgive me, is it he partly, there could be the financial piece that it no longer gets funded.
Yeah, we're not on free school meals,
or it can
so he can't
systemic
access that service.
i.e. he's no longer eligible.
Yeah.
The latter.
Yeah, so that's just an observation. I won't be the only family in that position. And obviously we're talking a little bit, one of the things I saw in here is that engagement with clubs, youth support, artistic, things like that are good resilience things. He does those anyway, but I would love for him to be able to do those in the mainstream, which at the moment is a block. So like I say, unintentional outcome of the HAF programme.
Thank you. Who was next? Zoe.
Zoe Oddy, HCRG Care Group. So Catherine, mine's less a question, I think, and more an offer. I think it's a really interesting paper. I think there's something definitely reflecting Sarah's point about the interrelation of neurodiversity and how that puts us at greater risk, often because of the system rather than because of the neurodiversity of poor mental health, because of the way the system connects around children and young people with neurodiversity. But I wonder if there's a piece of work that we could do around mapping the I Thrive framework, and how, for those of you that don't know the I Thrive framework, that's about dividing the mental health support framework into getting help, getting advice, getting help, getting more help, and getting risk support, around this concept that most children and young people and families are thriving, and we want children and young people to always get back into thriving in a circular way, so that you can move in and out of different areas of the system at any point. So I wonder if there's something we could do around mapping the whole system support framework, not just the mental health commission services, around that I Thrive framework. And I would like to offer to do that with you.
When you say could we do it, I wouldn't know how big a job it would be, Catherine.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Zoe, really appreciate the offer, and yeah, happy to explore that further with you. So I think, yeah, again, if we're thinking about prevention and enabling as many people as possible, children, baby children, families, to access those protective factors or protective activities that give them the skills and capability to be more resilient and cope when they're faced with exam pressures, or, you know, rather than leading to other kind of adoption of other unhealthy behaviours as a coping mechanism, or risky behaviours like adopting vaping practices or drinking. Or so I think the more that we can do to really build on the assets we've already got, so kind of understanding what that looks like, I think would be useful next step. Thanks.
Thank you. Anna? Oh, Anna, yes.
Hi, so I just wanted to talk about the real benefit that GPs in Mid and South Essex have seen from the child and young people's mental health practitioners who are working for NELFT and embedded in GP practices. So they are sort of first line support for families. So if a parent comes with a distressed child or speaks to me on the telephone, I can book that parent consultation with our child and young person's mental health practitioner in the surgery. And that's been a real game changer for GPs. So I wanted to highlight that service. And it is all about early intervention. Children who are already under CAMS are not eligible to see that health practitioner, that mental health practitioner. She is a first line support for us and for families, and that's been a really positive. But the not so negative thing is, the not so good thing that I'm seeing at the moment is the children on the waiting lists for assessment for neurodiverse conditions, ADHD and autism. The very long waits that are currently being experienced are having significant knock-on effects because it just creates a lot of stress within the family and a lot of emotional wellbeing issues seem directly related to those long waits. And we need to do much more, I think, to try and help support our families in that area particularly.
On that last piece, Anna, that's a preparation for our workshop after this, actually, because that's all part of that piece. So thanks for that. On the mental health practitioners, so this is available at every GP surgery in Mid and South, is it?
Yes.
And what you talked about waiting lists for the other thing. Are there enough of them that the waiting lists then aren't too long?
So in terms of the, so in my own...
When you press a button to refer to a mental health practitioner.
Yes, I can get a parent and a child an appointment within a week or two at the most with the mental health practitioner that is working across the PCN. So they are allocated to primary care networks.
Very good.
And yeah, have been really, really helpful.
Thank you.
Sarah's got a hand up.
Tamver Allen.
So Sarah?
Yeah, so I think I would like to see mental health being a golden thread for children and young people in terms of us considering it every interaction that we have for children and young people. Because, you know, even if children, for example, are dealing with a long-term condition, you know, they may very well still be struggling with coming to terms with that or how they deal with it. I know Chris and I have had some conversations, he's here somewhere, I've seen him. We talk about the waiting list for diagnosis and assessment. My experience of that, and I'm, you know, this is not from Essex, but my son has autism, and you wait a very long time for an assessment, but it doesn't do anything at the end of getting that assessment, really. So for me, it's less about us being concerned about getting the assessment and more concerned about how we support people during that time that they're waiting for the assessment, because there might be other things we can do where parents will feel happier because they're still getting some support, and children will know that while they're waiting, some of their needs are being looked at. So I think sometimes we wait for that point when there might be other things we can do while they're waiting.
Understood.
And
let's do it back into the workshops then. We carry on.
Yeah, sorry. And I think the only other thing I was going to say is, and I know Helen knows this already, Ofsted are looking at how they think more holistically in their assessments around children and young people, and they're very much going to be looking at thriving as well as attendance and achievement. I don't know how they're going to measure that yet, but it may very well open up some doors for us as a system to think differently about that, very much about well-being and how we support that rather than just mental health issues.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Yeah, my name is Tanveer Alma. I'm Deputy Medical Director for the North East Essex Alliance.
Nice to see you.
So just echoing her sentiments, we have a children's young persons counsellor in Pendring, which is part of an initial pilot, which has now been extended for the next year, that has shown good improvements. With regards to the prolonged waiting list for autism ADHD assessments, that has been a system-wide challenge for quite some time. I'm also the chair of the clinical reference group for Northeast Essex. So we are working with community pediatricians to come up with a better pathway. The problem is there is still a focus on first point of contact with the GP, but a big chunk of this work has to be done in the school environment because the school report is essential. And that is actually still in development. But now we have done some communication across Northeast Essex for the Essex County offer, which is all the additional support because not everybody requires a diagnosis of autism and ADHD. There's a lot of evidence that about 60% of it is a social, construct and those difficulties which are leading to these behavioral issues. So it's been in the pipeline for a long time, but we are working on it as part of our responsibilities in the ICB as a clinical reference group to improve that pathway.
Thank you very much. And what comes out all the time is the importance of the whole system working. Yes, Will?
And Paul.
Paul, and just can I check if there's anybody else that also, otherwise I'll bring this to a close. Sorry, Will?
No.
Paul, have the last word before I go back to Catherine.
Thank you, John, and thank you very much for the paper. And I think it does set out a lot of really useful insight. And again, it sort of echoes earlier discussions in this meeting of the things we know and forget to act upon in some ways. There's lots here that we've known for a long time. The evidence base around the interventions around prevention and improvement of children and young people's mental health it's been around for quite a while. So so in that sense, it's really valuable to have it sort of very clearly stated. I suspect it would be helpful, John, if you asked us all to go away and do a little bit of homework to properly respond to this set of challenges and submit something back to a workshop on this subject. Because I think if we simply discuss it at the level we are going to discuss it today, we will not do this paper the justice it deserves, and it will not materially affect what we go away and do afterwards. So I think there's something about we ought to just reflect on the paper as organisations around this table, because we all have contributions to make to it. I think the point about the Thrive model that was referred to by a colleague just now is very germane to all of this, not least because it dovetails with, I think, a philosophy which is increasingly relevant both to the local authorities, but also to the NHS, which is how we tap into the assets and strengths that exist within communities, families, and so on, and how we support those strengths. And I think it is worth just reflecting on that as well in terms of how that might better guide some of our resource allocation in the longer term. But I just don't think we're going to get to really give the answers that you would like us to give today. And I do think we need to put a bit more process around this to get some good outcomes from it.
Well, thank you, Paul. I'm really hugely grateful. As you say, you can flick around and look at the surface, but you've got to get something fundamental change. So I'm assuming, Catherine, you would be very happy to accept that as an action.
Oh yeah, I would really welcome that. Really, again, another useful next step, and I'm just wondering whether maybe I can help by working with Zoe to maybe put together a bit of a framework around how it would be helpful for that information to kind of come back almost. So
thank you. So members of the Health and Wellbeing Board, Paul has suggested that each of us take responsibility to go away, consider this within our own area of responsibility, and that officers then arrange a workshop so that we can discuss in more detail. And I would suggest, Catherine, Paul, against a very short agenda of key question, that we might move from discussion to real purposeful focus and action, yeah? That's what you had in mind, Paul, I think. Is everybody content to go along with that?
Yeah.
Well done. Thank you, Paul. I really hadn't contemplated that. But Catherine, I'll leave you to liaise with Paul, make sure that we get this. We'll need to remind all members and set a time scale for people to be ready for the workshop, okay?
thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and thanks to everyone who's contributed to that. I found it very, very interesting. You not need to go, So I think we're now coming to the next in the series of items around children and young people. And Chris Martin, I think you're presenting.
Got two colleagues with him as well, Ahana and Caroline.
Chris, you'll introduce your colleagues. So we're due to finish about 11:45, Chris, if it's slightly after. Okay. The workshop at 12.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. I'll stand. Thanks for the opportunity to bring this presentation to you. We kind of wanted to bookend the session a little bit. You've heard the value and some great examples around early help, how supporting children at the earliest point possible benefits them. I think we wanted to also share with you some findings for a cohort of young people when their situations escalate to something much more serious. So can I introduce my colleagues Ahana and Caroline, who have undertaken a piece of work which I'm going to share with you through the slides. Just to give you a little bit of background, in the autumn, we as a children's Essex County Council leadership team held a summit, a residential care summit, which was to look at the challenges that we were having in terms of care sufficiency more generally, but in particular residential care. And we wanted to better understand and act upon those pressures that were being presented to us. Caroline and Ahana undertook some audits and a deep dive into 12 young people who had transitioned from inpatient care into local authority care. And I don't think for that cohort of young people I've seen such a piece of work, certainly not locally. I'm not sure whether anything kind of nationally was done, but it's a fascinating piece of work. And I think some of the things I just want to emphasise is that there is insight and learning for all colleagues around this table and the system-wide. And I think the issues that Ahana and Caroline will share with you and the solutions themselves are jointly held amongst us all. So I think there is still a cohort of young people for whom, with the best will in the world and with a wide range of supports and services available, they still fall between our fingers. So I'm going to hand over to Caroline and Ahana, and they're going to present you a bit more detail from those audits. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to check, Chair, do you want us to talk through the slides, or has people have had a chance to look at them already, or did you just want us to focus on?
Well, I think you can take the view that everybody should have had a chance to look at them, but it will always help just to have a very quick run through of key points rather than read them all.
That's absolutely fine. So I think we'll skip this bit around the questions asked, and we just go straight to our headline findings. So in terms of the 12, so these are 12 young people, as Chris said, who are at the top end almost, who had been in tier 4 placements, mental health units, and then ended up in the last year and a little bit. So we did a deep dive on those 12, and we looked at their whole journey throughout our intervention and beyond. And I think some of the headlines are at the time of the escalation, whether into care or into tier 4, none of those 12 young people had an education offer, a full-time education offer. Oftentimes there was a couple who had a part-time offer, but or a reduced offer, but not a full-time offer. And I think only one throughout the journey after being on a mental health unit and in care looked like they were heading towards an education offer. So there's still struggles with those young people ending up with an education offer. And I think the reason why we make that point is because I think we've heard a little bit today as well. There's wide and varied reasons for why children aren't attending school and not being able to be in school. But the impact of children not being in school, especially if you then add in the layers of familial trauma and other things, is that it very, very quickly breaks down family resilience. And that's what then leads into crisis. So that was very apparent in all 12 of these cases. That the school absence from school and not being in school and having routines very quickly eroded family systems and family functioning. And some of the reasons we were curious about around the resilience in schools as well, around why they couldn't be in school. It's like they can't be in school if they were self-harming, cannot meet need despite diagnosis and things like that. I think people have mentioned neurodiversity today as well, but we did find that 7 out of the 12 young people did have a diagnosis of ASD. And we found that the ordinarily available offer
in schools, mainstreams included, did not appear to meet this need for young people in their setting. So we were curious about how inclusive are we in our early intervention spaces for young people with neurodiversity. We've made the point around some of the delays in the EHCPs coming through, etc. as well, which I think colleagues are probably aware of. There was some particular detail around these young people again, that even after they've gone through the education process, the healthcare plan process, there was quite significant delays in being able to identify appropriate provision for them, and not having, again, that continuity of not having an alternative appropriate offer for them. Moving on, in terms of CAMS and early intervention, we saw that only one young person out of the 12 was not known to specialist services before their crisis, and we felt that there was what we would deem, again, I have to apologise because this was meant as an internal report we did, what we thought was not an adequate offer from CAMS at that point in their journeys. And there was a series of multiple referrals, a lot of rationales around being behavioural, not mental health or wellbeing related, home life not stable enough to intervene, etc. We had some, so this was a lessons learned piece for us as well about how could we create that change within our system. And we found that we don't often escalate, and we don't often ask those questions as well as we should of our partners. So that was for us.
Yep, so out of the 12 young people that we did the audit for, 7 of them had some kind of sexual related trauma in their history. So sexual abuse or suspected sexual abuse or rape within the family or within the extended network was a feature, which I thought was really significant. We need to understand a little bit more about that and how we're supporting those young people dealing with that trauma, to prevent them then becoming people that need to rely on mental health services throughout their adult life. Out of the 12 young people, 2 have never been in care, so there were 2 that we managed to divert once they were in a Tier 4 setting. However, sadly, one of them has since come into care. And that was really around the family's resilience again. So it's again, what can we learn? How can we be more curious? And what support can we put in to prevent that breakdown within the family network? And what can we do around parental trauma, around what parents have seen? It must be very, very traumatic to see your child self-harm, to find them ligaturing. And so actually, we're not good enough at working with parents around their own trauma of that experience to enable them to be resilient and care for their own children. 2 of the young people were adoption breakdowns, and again there were some lessons for us to learn in children's social care about earlier intervention when there's signs that the adoption is starting to feel that there's tension or it's starting to break down. And there were signs, and there were post-adoption teams that highlighted that, and we didn't pick it up early enough. So there's something for us about learning about how we intervene at an earlier stage in those kinds of situations. There was a really high prevalence of feeling not wanted amongst these young people. So 8 out of the 10 young people that went into care from a Tier 4 unit felt that they weren't wanted either by their family or by the system. So there's something really about how we as a system make these valued so that we can support them and understand.
I mean, just to make the point, the not being wanted then leads to quite high levels of dysregulation, which then translates to a system trying to react as opposed to respond. So we then become very reactive, and we put more and more people, more and more process around young people. So a typical example is 2-to-1, 3-to-1, where we're trying to contain as opposed to try and, but we're then already in firefighting mode. So it's about that stopping and pausing moments where we could have, where we can take them and how we take those.
9 out of the 10 young people that we that went into care as out of this audit went into care in an unplanned way. And so there's something about actually we're not predicting that care pathway for them. And what then ends up happening is that they go into very expensive provisions that
aren't necessarily most suitable for their need, but as a system, we haven't been able to plan around what they really need in a more measured and informed way. Out of the 10 young people in care, only one was in a foster care placement and continues to be there with enhanced support. But the nine others were all in high cost, high staffed residential settings. So there's something about the care market not being set up to understand and meet the needs of these young people. And therefore, we end up with them in provisions that aren't most suitable for them. And as a system, we recognise that there's not the best outcomes for these young people. Other reflections?
Yes, we did some reflections on the back of this audits, and we've just sort of listed a few of those. So I think some of those, I think the pertinent ones I would suggest is, if you took a hindsight view, which is what we did when you do audits, it's arguable that with much stronger early help provision, could we have avoided? There's a question to ask ourselves: might we have avoided crisis further down the line, needing such expensive placements at the end of the road? But again, it's very difficult to predict outcomes when you are dealing with it at the front end of things. But we've taken a very robust lens around our early offers within CAMS. Equally, we've taken that internally as well, and we've considered what our early intervention looks like. And do we need to do a bit more work around family solutions, etc., to strengthen working with mental health, or training, etc., offers that we would give staff? And there's a few more.
I'd like to move into discussion. And
yeah.
We can. Yeah. So, I mean, this was a study of 12 people. Forgive me if I missed it. What's our estimate of the population of this cohort across the county, you think?
At the moment, we've got 22 Essex young people that are in Tier 4 settings and at risk. Most of them are at risk of coming into care.
Sorry, what was that number?
At the moment, there's 24 young people in Essex that are in inpatient settings, mental health inpatient settings.
So this was 50% of the population. Is that what you mean?
So yeah, so we took at that point in time, so we just took those. So it goes up and down.
And this is also children, young people who have been in Tier 4. So I'm trying to understand the population that are in and have been in the last sort of 5 years type of thing. And of course, this comes also at the time that, as the ICB chairs were talking with me earlier today, and was at SNE yesterday, I think, Tuesday. It comes at the same time as the concerns about what's the phrase, aggressive outreach, is it?
Assertive outreach.
Yeah, to assertive outreach, and because you've got this is looking at Tier 4, and this is about what happens with those young people. I must say, if they haven't got an education setting, that does feel very much a county council responsibility. But there's also the worry that they don't escalate to go on to do things as happened in Nottingham, and may be revealed by inquiries at Southport in due course. So it's to actually understand that the population of those who are in or have been in Tier 4 must be much greater.
So we have Helen online.
Helen, Director of Children's Services. Helen.
Yeah, so first of all, can I say a big thank you to Ahana and Caroline for presenting this quite tricky space. We did this piece of work as an internal piece of work, as they said, for Essex County Council, just looking at the fact that we have had very fractious relationships around Tier 4, and we didn't think we were really servicing those children extremely well. And I think it's been a really insightful piece of work. And I think one of the things that I would like people to go away and think about is that when young people come out of or end from Tier 4, it seems to be quite a cliff edge. And I'm not sure we've developed the right provision across the system for them to benefit from the input that they've had in a Tier 4 setting. And just to kind of remind people that children's residential care is about providing care, family home for children when their parents can't look after them. It's not got special clinical input that that can help young people with mental health issues and ongoing mental health issues. So I do think it kind of gives us a bit of a challenge about what do we do. Yes, the numbers are very small, but actually this population of young people will be in the system in adult services for an awful long period of time. They will become the recipients of adult mental health services too. So I do think we should actually, as a system, take away and think about what do we do as step down from tier 4.
So, and just for the benefit of others, Helen, am I right in case anybody in the room is not clear? Tier 4 is NHS, tier 1 to 3 is community like EPUT, is that right?
So tier 4 is the inpatient unit for provided by NHS, provided by EPUT. Tier 3 for us in Essex is provided by NAUFT, and tier 3 goes across GP practice, as we've heard already in the presentations today. And tier 2 is colleagues from HRCG, and tier 1 is everybody leaning into emotional health and wellbeing.
Right, that's very helpful. That was helpful for me, Helen. Thank you, just to get that totally clear in my head. Okay. And the issue, Helen, I've heard you say the question is, are there youngsters who sadly should be in tier 4 who are still being managed in the community? And then this piece is those who come out of tier 4, are we playing fair by them?
Yeah, I think it's both ways around. I think, have we got the right provision for this very small group of young people with very significant issues about both their behaviour, their mental health, and their neurodiversity? I think it all creates, a very challenging space for across the health community, the social care community, and our education community. And how we come well round that to provide good services. I'd be very interested to hear from Herts and West Essex, because in Hertfordshire there's a kind of a tier 3.5 unit just opened up. And I'm curious about whether that has made a significant difference in this space.
It's a small cohort, but a very small cohort, Helen, but a very expensive one, but also one with a very high likelihood of really bad lives, which we would like to address. So,
and long-term lines, John. I'm thinking about the whole of their adulthood too.
Absolutely. Paul, I don't know if you're able to answer the tier 3.5 piece, and you mentioned there's another issue that actually could well do with being referred to those people with a special knowledge of this piece. But Paul, are you able to help us with tier 3.5?
Two or three.
And I'll take other points.
2 or 3 things. One, I ought to declare an interest in another role that I have. I chair a provider organisation in the east of England, in the East Midlands, that is involved in providing tier 4 mental health services. So I should just
thank you, noted.
From that, I am certainly aware of the model around tier 3.5, which is one of the approaches that a number of mental health provider collaboratives have been developing as a way of managing avoiding unnecessary placement into tier 4 bedded services. I think what we can do in terms of what we're doing in Hertfordshire West Essex is pull together a note to put round colleagues. But what I'm conscious of is in this room today, we do not have, we have some of the constituent organisations of the Mental Health Provider Collaborative in the east of England, but we don't have, if you like, that collectively here. And yet this requires that specialist commissioning expertise to be in the conversation in order to really get a sense of how they are seeing the service model change, and to get maybe some of the reflections on what we've heard in this very helpful presentation, I have to say very candid presentation, in terms of what that might imply for the design of step down, as well as the step up elements of this, because the step up is also in many cases quite clunky, and that can be improved as well.
The commissioning order, you've been people like EPUT.
Yeah, so I mean, all the mental health providers in the East of England region, as is the case in other regions, come together to be effectively act as the specialist commissioner for these types of services.
No, I was thinking as the presentation was going on, we do have membership from EPID and NALF, but they're not here today, as it happens. So, and I don't think we've had apologies either. So it does seem to me to call your notes going to be very helpful, but we also need to potentially convene the right people around the right table. Other colleagues wanting to contribute? Sorry?
You will, Paul.
But Will?
Thank you, John. Paul's just made one of my points, so thank you for that, Paul. Totally agree with that approach. And I think I'm in the same place, John, as you were with your question over numbers. But first of all, I'd say Helen's totally right. Small population numbers, though it is, does not mean that it's not important. It's very important, both to the individuals, of course, but to us as a system and all the stakeholders in the system. And of course, this might be, I'll call it the Today 12, just for to paraphrase. And by the way, thank you, Caroline and Hannah, for the work, really interesting. But I'll call it the Today 12, but actually this potentially is a lifetime of adverse experience, life experience, and adverse cost implications for us all. So, like you, John, I'm not quite sure on the numbers, so I don't know what this 12 represents. You know, I'm thinking of the data in there, all of which is really useful, but those 12 are what fraction of the total population is there? And then also, it might well just deal with that first of all, and then I'll see whether I have a further question.
But I don't think we know the number. I mean,
we have got a tracker. So in children's social care, we have got a tracker that that records all the children that are currently in Tier 4 settings that are known to children's social care. And so we can certainly look at that. I couldn't give you the numbers now, but we certainly do.
Oh, right. Sorry, I thought I heard you say 24 earlier.
24 are the number who are currently.
Currently, okay.
24, but
okay,
over a period of time,
but this paper is also about.
They would add up as well.
Yeah.
So cumulatively over the years, they would have added up as well.
Yeah.
We know.
I'm going to say, excuse me, I'm just going to say, view of the time. Paul's going to give us a note about what's going on in Hearts and West. I'm going to ask you, please, to just take a bit of time to get it right, because there is those who are in Tier 4 now, those who have been in Tier 4 in the last X years, whichever number you wish to give us. I would say, Helen, there would be those who you would say might need to be in Tier 4, but their current is availability for them. So that lets you get your total cohort, Will.
Just to say that the information about Tier 4 bed days, not the numbers, but Tier 4 bed days, is published in open source material. So, and we can see that the number of Tier 4 bed days has radically reduced over the last few years. So, but I mean, but that wasn't the purpose of the debate today, was to go into the numbers. It was to pull through some of the issues in more of an in-depth way to say, actually, this group of children, I don't think we're servicing as well as we should as a system.
May I have a follow-up, John?
Yes, of course, Will.
Thank you. So maybe it's not for now. I know John's trying to manage the time, but it's really important to me to know how these 12 were chosen. You know, what were the characteristics which made these 12 be analysed in further detail as you have?
Okay.
And then, if the numbers are so small, why don't we know this about everyone? Those are my two follow-up questions, John.
And I think they're questions that are worthy of proper answer rather than spur of the moment. And I really do, because where I'm going is, I think, the right solution here. So on the previous agenda item, Paul asked us all to go into some homework. I think I'd quite like to ask if the Health and Wellbeing Board would be willing to sponsor effectively or request that relevant parties produce invite a specialist person to come and have a proper deep discussion with Paul's note, with the information you have requested, Will, and I've requested, in order that the deep conversation, Helen, that you wanted can really go 5 layers down. Is that all right with you, Helen?
Yes, John, she's nodding.
Right. Would that have the support of the room?
Yeah.
Yes.
And that will be for Chris Martin. Chris?
Yep. Fine, John.
That be for you to take forward, please. Get into this in a more granular way to make sure that the relevant colleagues are in the room, which is, has been said, they're not here today.
Did you want to just, Nick's got a point.
Nick, yes.
So I feel terrible now. I don't want to prolong the debate. I do feel old today. 31 years ago, I worked my last day in what are now called Tier 4 settings. And I still know a lot of people who do work in those settings. I think it's important we get their view as well. 24 is probably a lot less than there were 30 years ago. The bed base has changed considerably.
Exactly.
What I suspect we need to do is some sort of collective deep dive, because the collaborative commissioning in this area isn't in great repair, I have to say. It does feel like the level of in-reach that we get from social care, from education, and from what we now call our community psychiatric services is less than it used to be. And there's much more time spent on diagnostic definition than there is on the care and support that these young people actually require. So I would advocate that we step back as a system, because if we have an area where really we should look at ourselves and say we haven't done a good job for young people, this is probably pretty near the top of the list. And as Helen says, or Helen said, most of these people will go on and go on into adult psychiatric services as well, or the criminal justice system. And what we seem to have now are a series of cliff edges. So we used to have a hospital system and what we now call a CAMS system that was part of an integrated service. What we now have are a number of different bits of service. Is that what we set out to do? I don't think it is, but that's what we've ended up with. So I would advocate that we do take a step back and consider whether we do something much more fundamental as a set of partners.
Excellent. Stated much better than I did, Nick. Thank you. So deep dive, fundamental are the right words. So, but thanks to Helen and Caroline, you're going to have a major impact here. You've got some specific questions to answer, which you will give us in the form of a paper. Paul will give us a very helpful paper. And I'd say if either Will, you or Mike or anybody else wants to produce a piece of item into it, but then Chris, you will lead the work under the ownership of the Health and Wellbeing Board, deep dive workshop with the right people round the table to have a fundamental look at this and to identify, and then to come back to a future meeting of this board. Okay, Chris? Sure. Excellent, thank you. Thanks to everyone who participated on what, as you said, Helen's a tricky topic. We're coming to the end of the public meeting. The forward plan is as shown. We have already added to it today. I always remind you, this is your board, not mine. So we are always ready to receive more agenda items that are relevant. Suicide prevention will pick up. Jane, I think we're coming up too soon to ambulance service update again. I have no urgent, no notice of any other business. Does anybody wish to raise anything in the room? So there has been much interest in the issues of local government reform and devolution. I will say to you, this is a government announcement. It is not a county council announcement. We are led to believe that that announcement may happen imminently in the next few days, and it may or may not include Essex in the first tier of county councils being taken forward for devolution. Devolution is the first piece of this, and it would lead, we believe that the government announcement may take us down the line of having a mayoral election in a year's time. And then there will be conversations about the shape, scale, or indeed the actuality of local government reform based on whatever guidelines the government publish in the time of their announcement. And then the work on gathering evidence will continue. So we wait the government's announcement with it. But what we know, Nick and Helen and I and Sarah all know, is that this must not get in the way of this county council delivering everything that the residents of Essex need, and that will continue to be our priority, whatever else distractions come along. So thank you all very much. We will be ending the public meeting now. We will be signing, for those of you watching on YouTube, we will throw the